Tim's trying to bring it to our attention, the reality that, yes, it is true. The Greek word pneuma, which is how we translate spirit, is actually neuter. And this is interesting when you compare it to, say, Hebrew and Latin, which are also languages that carry gender in their nouns. English doesn't do this, right? You take the word spirit in English, there's no gender assigned to the words themselves, to the terms. But there are other languages besides Hebrew and Latin and Greek that carry gender in their terms. I think many European languages do so, like some French, I believe, or Spanish, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So here's a kind of interesting fact to consider. The word spirit in Greek, the gender of the word is neuter, right? It's neither feminine nor masculine in its gender, all right, of the word. It's not to suggest that the spirit is gendered, it's simply the word itself has gender. But when we compare it to Latin, the word spirit, spiritus, I believe it is spirito. I'll have to look this up. I'm just pulling this off the top of my head. But in post, I'll show you what the actual word is. But I think it's something similar to that. It's spirito, whatever. But Latin word is actually gendered as masculine. Isn't that interesting? The Latin version. But by comparison, the Hebrew word, which is ruach, which means the same thing, spirit or breath or wind, it's actually feminine in gender. So if you just put these three languages on the table and have a discussion between the three of them, Hebrew, Latin, Greek, you're going to find that the gender is going to change depending on which language you're looking at. But that's neither here nor there. What is more important is the context. So sometimes it's necessary to include an it in your personal pronoun or your demonstrative pronoun. But other times when we're talking about other descriptions that are in the Bible, such as the Holy Spirit's given the description of the paraclete, the comforter, which is rooted in the Greek word parakletos, that word is masculine, if I remember off the top of my head. And therefore, since Jesus says that this parakletos is going to be sent by the Father and by myself, speaking of in Yeshua's own voice, then it's proper to say that he is going to be sent. Plus, a point I might also bring up to Jehovah's Witnesses, since they believe that the Holy Spirit is an impersonal it, it's common for them to translate the Holy Spirit's personal pronouns, the Spirit's pronouns, using it and this and that one and things like that, rather than saying he. But Unitarian Christians, biblical Unitarians, at least those who are of the flavor that believe that the Holy Spirit is actually just another name for God, since it is a well-known fact that God represents himself as in the masculine personal pronoun as a he, right? He's and as the Father, which is also a male picture or image, right? It uses masculine anthropomorphic terminology. Even though God's pure spirit, he doesn't have any true gender in that sense, right? He doesn't have body parts that would identify him as a male, is what I'm trying to say. But so since he's pure spirit, if in fact the Holy Spirit is just another way of describing God, like the biblical Unitarians say, contra Jehovah's Witnesses' perspective that the Holy Spirit is an impersonal force, if the biblical Unitarian perspective is accurate, then their Bible should reflect those personal and demonstrative pronouns as, you ready for it? Masculine. Why? Because context demands that the Spirit is talking about God, the Father, who himself is a he. All right, Tim continues. Speaking about the personal pronouns and things like that, masculine pronouns, this fact, coupled with the fact that he, the Spirit, leads, teaches, sanctifies, and comforts the individual believer, as well as the community of the faithful, these truths would indicate his individual personality. And again, this is something that the Jehovah's Witnesses seem to either finesse, bypass, ignore, or outright don't understand. That an impersonal force can't display personal actions, especially ones that indicate personal will, decision-making process, feelings, intelligent thought and speech, etc., etc. Last time I checked, impersonal objects or forces of nature, water, electricity, wind, etc., they don't have the ability to express themselves the way that the Holy Spirit is described in the Bible. So I'm not really sure why they even champion that illogical perspective. If I were forced to choose between the biblical Unitarian perspective, that the Holy Spirit is simply another name for God himself, right? Another name for God the Father, versus the Jehovah's Witness perspective that the Holy Spirit is an impersonal force. By the way, I'm picking on the Jehovah's Witnesses, but they're not the only religious group out there that believe that the Holy Spirit is an impersonal force. I think there's some other Christian groups that believe that as well. Don't quote me on this, but I think maybe some oneness Pentecostals might hold that position. Some Church of God individuals. I need to look it up again. I'm drawing a blank. But if I were forced between these two positions, which, by the way, I reject both of them for the most part. But if I was forced to choose one of them, and I wasn't given the third option of choosing the Trinitarian position that I already hold to, then I would actually, using the biblical context and the biblical data that's in front of me, I would actually go with the biblical Unitarian position. I think they're more accurate in that representation of the Spirit. Although, again, I at the end of the day, I reject their position that the Holy Spirit is merely another way of describing God. Sometimes it is a way of describing God. We have to look at context, but other times it's clear from the text that the Holy Spirit is this agent of God being sent to do God's bidding, similar to the way Yeshua is sent to do God's bidding. Father is sending Son to do what is the Father's will, etc.